Before you even choose a machine, before you decide how much to bet, before the reels begin to spin, there's something about $2 slot machines that most players completely misunderstand. They look almost identical to every other slot. Same flashing lights, same spinning reels, same bonus features. But behind the screen, they operate very differently. And here's what makes them interesting. Experienced players don't treat $2 machines the same way they treat 50 cents or $1 or even high-limit slots. In fact, some players actively look for them, while others avoid them completely. Because inside casinos, $2 slot machines sit in a very specific position. Not low risk, not high limit, but something in between. A space where the psychology changes, the pacing changes, and most importantly, the way money moves through the machine changes. Today, we're going to break down exactly what makes $2 slot machines different, how casinos design them, why some players believe they behave differently, and what actually happens when you sit down and press spin. Welcome back to the channel. If you've ever wondered whether betting more changes your chances, or why certain machines feel more active than others, this video will give you a deeper look at how $2 slot machines really work. Not myths, not tricks, just the system behind the experience. Section 1. Where $2 machines sit in the casino. Walk through any casino floor and you'll notice something subtle. Machines are not placed randomly. They are carefully arranged. Low-denomination machines, like 25 cents or 50 cents, are usually placed in high-traffic areas, bright lights, busy zones, constant movement. High-limit machines, on the other hand, are often placed in quieter sections, more space, less noise, higher stakes. But $2 machines sit somewhere in between. They're not the cheapest option, but they're not exclusive either. They're designed for players who are willing to spend more per spin but still want the feeling of a standard slot experience. And that positioning matters because it changes the type of player who sits down. Section 2. The player psychology shift. A player betting 50 cents per spin experiences the machine differently than someone betting $2. At lower bets, spins feel casual. Losses feel small. The session can stretch longer. But at $2 per spin, something shifts. Every spin carries more weight. Losses feel faster. Wins feel more noticeable. And decisions become more deliberate. This creates a different psychological environment. Players become more focused, more aware of their balance, more sensitive to streaks, both winning and losing. And this awareness changes behavior. Some players slow down, others increase bets even further, and some begin chasing results much sooner than they would on lower denomination machines. Section 3. Coin-in and speed. Casinos measure success through something called coin-in, not just how much you lose, but how much money flows through the machine over time. At $2 per spin, coin-in increases rapidly. Let's say a player spins 100 times. At 50 cents per spin, that's $50 cycled through the machine. At $2 per spin, that becomes $200. Same number of spins, very different exposure. And this is where casinos benefit, because the house edge applies to every spin. The more money cycled through, the more consistent the casino's advantage becomes, which means $2 machines don't need to behave differently to generate more profit. They simply rely on higher spin value. Section 4. Do $2 machines pay more? This is one of the most common beliefs among players, that higher denomination machines have better payouts. And in some cases, this belief has a partial truth. Certain higher denomination machines can be configured with slightly higher RTP, but this does not guarantee better outcomes in short sessions, because RTP is calculated over extremely long periods. Thousands, sometimes millions of spins. In a short session, anything can happen. A 50-cent machine could hit a large bonus. A $2 machine could stay completely cold. The difference is not in individual outcomes, but in how the math plays out over time. Section 5. The illusion of stronger machines. Many players say $2 machines feel stronger. They describe them as more active, more responsive, more likely to hit bonuses. But what they're actually feeling is variance. Higher bets create larger swings. Wins feel bigger. Losses feel sharper. Near misses feel more intense. Everything is amplified. And when everything feels amplified, it creates the illusion that the machine itself is different. But underneath, the same system is operating. Random outcomes. House edge. Repeated spins. Section 6. Session length changes. Because $2 spins cost more, sessions tend to be shorter. Players run through their bankroll faster, which means decisions happen more quickly. Should I continue? Should I increase my bet? Should I stop? These decisions appear earlier in the session compared to lower denomination machines. And that changes behavior. Some players leave earlier. Others try to recover losses faster. And this is where discipline becomes important, because higher spin cost reduces the time available to make calm decisions. Section 7. The first few spins. Interestingly, experienced players often pay close attention to the first few spins on a $2 machine, not because they can predict outcomes, but because they are observing the feel of the session. Is the machine active? Are there frequent small hits? Are there bonus teases? Or is it completely quiet? These observations don't change probability, but they influence how long a player chooses to stay. And on higher denomination machines, those decisions carry more financial impact. Section 8. The real difference. So what actually makes $2 slot machines different? Not the outcome, not the randomness, but the speed at which money moves. Higher bets compress time. They accelerate exposure. They bring decisions forward, and they amplify every emotional response, which makes them feel very different, even though the underlying system remains the same. And this leads to a deeper question. If $2 machines accelerate everything, then what happens when players stay too long? How do casinos use this faster pace to their advantage? And why do some players behave very differently when they sit at these machines? Because the real difference isn't just in the machine, it's in what happens after the first few spins are over. Section 9. When the session starts to shift. At the beginning of a $2 slot session, everything feels controlled. The player is aware, they're watching their balance, they're observing the machine. But after a few spins, something begins to change, not in the machine, but in the player. The first small loss doesn't feel significant, but then another spin misses, then another, and suddenly the balance drops faster than expected. At $2 per spin, 10 spins is already $20. 50 spins is $100. And because the spins happen quickly, this transition feels almost invisible. Players don't always notice how fast the session is moving. They only notice the result. And by the time they check their balance again, the situation has already changed. Section 10. The acceleration effect. $2 machines create something we can call acceleration pressure. The session moves faster than the player expects. And when things move faster, decision-making becomes reactive instead of planned. A player might sit down thinking, "I'll just play for a few minutes." But within those few minutes, dozens of spins can happen. Losses can stack quickly. And the natural reaction is to respond. Not pause, not step away, but respond. This is where behavior begins to shift. Section 11. The first adjustment. When players notice losses building, they often make their first adjustment. They change something, increase the bet, switch the number of lines, activate a bonus feature, or simply spin faster. This adjustment feels logical, it feels like action, but it introduces something important: commitment. Because once a player changes their approach, they are no longer observing the machine. They are now trying to influence the outcome, even though the outcome remains random. Section 12. The illusion of control. Slot machines are designed to give players choices: bet size, lines, bonus buy options, turbo spins. All of these create a sense of control. But control in slot machines is limited. Players can control how much they bet. They cannot control what the reels produce. Still, when players adjust settings, it creates a feeling that something has changed, that maybe now the machine will respond differently. This belief keeps players engaged longer, especially on $2 machines where each adjustment feels more significant because the stakes are higher. Section 13. The near miss becomes stronger. On higher denomination machines, near misses feel more intense. 2 jackpot symbols land, the third just misses. At 50 cents, this might feel disappointing. At $2, it feels important, like something almost happened. This emotional amplification is not accidental. It's a natural result of higher stakes, but the effect is the same. The player feels closer to a win, even though nothing has actually changed, and that feeling makes leaving more difficult. Section 14. Faster loss, slower awareness. One of the most interesting patterns on $2 machines is the gap between actual loss and perceived loss. Because spins are fast and continuous, players don't process each loss individually. They process the session in chunks. A few spins here, a few spins there, and suddenly the balance is much lower. This delay in awareness is critical because by the time the player fully recognizes the loss, they are already deep into the session, and at that point, leaving feels harder. Section 15. The recovery instinct. Once losses become noticeable, a new behavior appears: the desire to recover. This is one of the strongest psychological drivers in gambling. A player who planned to leave after a short session may now think, "I'll just win a little back and then stop." But recovery is unpredictable. It may happen quickly, or it may not happen at all. And every additional spin exposes them to the house edge. On $2 machines, this process happens faster because each spin carries more value. Section 16. Why players stay longer than planned. If you observe players carefully, you'll notice something consistent. Very few sessions end exactly as planned. Players rarely leave at the exact moment they intended. Instead, sessions stretch. A few more spins, then a few more. And on $2 machines, those extra spins matter more because each one moves more money through the system. And the more money moves through the system, the more the house edge begins to apply itself. Section 17. Casino design and mid-denomination machines. Casinos understand how players behave at different bet levels. That's why $2 machines are often placed strategically, not too isolated, not too crowded. They sit in areas where players feel comfortable staying, long enough to build a session, but not so intense that players feel overwhelmed. This balance encourages longer play without making the risk feel too obvious. Section 18. The momentum loop. At this stage, the player is no longer thinking about the first few spins. They are inside what we can call the momentum loop. Spin, result. Spin again. React. Spin again. Time compresses, decisions become automatic, and the session continues without clear checkpoints. This loop is where most extended sessions happen, not because the player planned it, but because the structure of the experience encourages it. Section 19. The key turning point. There is usually a moment in every session where things could go either way. The player could stop or continue. On $2 machines, this moment arrives quickly because the cost per spin brings results faster. But most players miss this moment. They continue playing, not because they decided to, but because they didn't interrupt the flow. Section 20. The question that matters. If $2 machines accelerate everything, if losses appear faster, if decisions happen sooner, then the most important question is not, is this machine good or bad? The real question is, how long will I stay? Because in a system built on repeated spins, time is the variable that shapes the outcome. And once a session passes a certain point, the direction becomes less about luck and more about mathematics. And that leads to the final piece of the puzzle. What actually happens when a player stays too long on a $2 machine? Why do outcomes begin to feel more predictable over time? And how does the house edge quietly take control of the session? Because understanding that transition changes the way you see every spin. Section 21. When randomness starts to fade. At the beginning of a session, outcomes feel scattered. A small win appears, then a loss, then maybe a bonus tease. Nothing feels consistent. But over time, especially on a $2 machine, something subtle begins to happen. The chaos starts to settle. Not because the machine changes, but because the number of spins increases. And with more spins, probability begins to organize the results. This is not something players can see directly. It's something they feel. Sessions begin to lean in one direction, balances trend downward more steadily, and the randomness that once felt exciting becomes quieter, more controlled, more predictable. Section 22. The slow pull of the house edge. Every spin carries a small mathematical advantage for the casino. On its own, that advantage is almost invisible, but repeated hundreds of times, it begins to accumulate. On a $2 machine, this accumulation happens faster because each spin moves more money. More value is exposed to the system, and the system is built to return slightly less than it receives. Not instantly, not aggressively, but consistently. This is what creates the slow pull, a gradual shift where losses begin to outweigh wins over time. Section 23. Why $2 machines feel harsher. Many players describe $2 machines as harsher, not because they lose every time, but because the swings feel stronger. A short losing streak costs more, a longer session drains faster, and even when wins happen, they often feel like temporary relief rather than true recovery. This perception comes from compression. Higher bets compress time and money into shorter windows, so what might take an hour on a 50-cent machine can happen in minutes on a $2 machine. The experience feels more intense, more immediate, and sometimes more unforgiving. Section 24. The illusion of being close. As sessions extend, players often feel like they're getting closer to a win. They've seen near misses. They've triggered small bonuses. They've experienced moments where something almost happened. This creates a powerful belief that continuing will eventually lead to a bigger result. But slot machines do not build toward outcomes. They don't track progress. They don't move closer to jackpots. Each spin is independent, and the feeling of being close is created entirely by the experience, not the system. Section 25. The real risk of staying too long. The longer a player stays on a $2 machine, the more the session shifts from possibility to probability. Early spins are unpredictable. Later spins reflect the underlying math. And because the house edge favors the casino, long sessions tend to move in that direction. This doesn't mean every long session ends in a loss, but it means the longer the session continues, the more the system behaves as designed, and the more consistent the outcome becomes. Section 26. Why some players leave early. Experienced players often don't wait for outcomes to settle. They don't stay long enough to see the full effect of the house edge. Instead, they limit their sessions. They step away early, not because they can predict results, but because they understand exposure. They know that time is not neutral. Time increases the influence of probability, So they reduce time, and in doing so, they reduce how much the system can act on their balance. Section 27. Control versus outcome. This leads to an important distinction. Players cannot control outcomes, but they can control duration. They can decide how many spins to play, how long to stay, when to leave. And these decisions matter more than most players realize. Because while each spin is random, the total number of spins determines how much the house edge can apply. Section 28. The system behind the experience. Casinos are not built around single moments. They are built around repeated behavior, spinning again and again and again. Each spin is small, but together they create a pattern where probability gradually takes control, and $2 machines accelerate that process. They don't change the system, they simply move players through it faster. Section 29. The final perspective. So when you sit down at a $2 slot machine, you're not just choosing a higher bet, you're choosing a faster experience, a compressed session, a system where decisions matter sooner and outcomes reveal themselves more quickly. The machine itself is not different, the math is not different, but the pace is, and that pace changes everything. Section 30. Closing thought. In the end, $2 slot machines are not better and they're not worse. They simply operate on the same principles at a different speed. And once you understand that, you begin to see the session differently, not as a series of random wins and losses, but as a flow of time, money, and probability interacting together. If you found this breakdown helpful and want more deep insights into how casinos really work, from slot machine psychology to hidden patterns on the casino floor, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like if it changed the way you see slot machines, and share it with someone who thinks higher bets always mean better chances. Because once you understand the system, you don't just play differently, you see everything differently.